Okay, welcome. I'm going to kick off this presentation now, if that's okay. My name's Dave Jackson. I'm the managing director of a company called Ripped Orange, and I'm in sunny. I would say sunny, but it's just getting dark here in New Zealand, just on 5 p.m. at night. What we're going to be covering today is what we learned moving 1,000 people to Microsoft 365 in a pandemic. So this was over the last 4 to 6 weeks here in New Zealand from a training perspective. A couple of slides that I just want to talk to beforehand. So this time next year, or a couple of months earlier, there's an opportunity to join the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand. I was actually planning to be there for the conference this year, but missed out unfortunately because it's not on. But this is a great conference. It's a really great one to bookmark as part of your session, and who doesn't need an excuse to go to Vegas? I'd also like to thank the generous sponsors that have helped make this event possible. You can see their names up there, and if you've got a chance to support them, please do. A call out to the team from Swoop, who I've met over the ditch in Australia. Also, don't forget, there's an opportunity to donate to the following charity relief funds that are here. These links will also be at the end of the slide as well. The important things, the what's in it for me, so there's a raffle here for I haven't got one of these, an Oculus Quest all-in-one. So it looks like a VR headset. We can do some wonderful stuff. I think my son would probably enjoy this, and it looks like a pretty cool tool. So you can follow that link. I'll put that up at the end as well, but you do have to answer some questions to go in the draw to win one of these. And most importantly, grab your phone out now if you want to. This is where you can place speaker feedback. We'll put this at the end of the session, and you can just point your phone up here and fill in some feedback. So feedback both on the session that we're presenting now and on the event, and the great job that the team have put together to pull this event together would be wonderful. So if you can share some time for some feedback, that would be great. So kia ora, my name is Dave Jackson, as I said, and I'm the managing director of a company called Ripped Orange. So we're based here in New Zealand. There's about 6 of us up and down the country. Something interesting, I've cycled across Alaska and actually a bit in South America as well. So have travelled to a few places around the world. And I'm from Christchurch, New Zealand. So that's in the South Island of New Zealand in Christchurch. Famous or infamous for a large earthquake about 9 years ago. We're not going to have one today, thankfully. What we're going to cover is we focus on online training. So we want to make training effective and interactive. And by doing a blend of that with interactions and exercises as part of training. And that's what we're going to be covering off of the learnings that we had during a couple of training projects. But to kick this off, we also want to actually get to know you. Why do we want to do that? We do want some exercise. This is a very one-way exercise that we've got here now, as I'm talking to a screen and a monitor. But what I want to do is I'm going to post into the chat here a little link. Copy this, and I'm going to drop this into the Q&A chat, and you'll see this pop up in a second. We're going to get some interactivity. So you should see that pop up. If you're not sure where the Q&A chat is, it's up on the right here, and you'll need to press the little button that I'm hovering on there. Jump into that. Now, why are we doing that? Because we want to get some interactivity. So I'm asking some questions here. I'll bring up the form so we can see what it looks like. This is the form here. Where are you from? So I'm from New Zealand. And what device am I using? I'm using a Windows device to watch this session. Okay, and I'm going to submit that. That's cool. We go back and we're just going to have a look at the responses. So hopefully, and I'm going to pause here and wait and see some other responses come into this chat. So hopefully we've got more than one person in the session. We'll see how that goes. So click on the link in the chat and come through there. I think we had a visitor from Chicago. So looking forward to a response there from the Americas. Cool. Okay, so we've got some from Europe. Welcome. Someone from Asia, and also someone from Americas. Now, why do we do this? It's to get some interactivity. I could talk and go on for ages on this, but this is allowing us to get some interaction back and forth. Oh, kia ora, we've got somebody else from New Zealand. That's great. We did this as part of the training. When we did that, we made sure that we could interact early in a session to get some details. You'd think if you were running a normal training session, you'd come in and talk to the respondents and get them to ask questions, whereas very hard to do that in an online training environment. So being able to put out some interactivity is great. And now we've seen that we've got 8 responses, maybe a few more. Let's see, have come in, and you've all actually had a go at the Q&A, which is good as well, because we're going to ask some questions and respond to that. If you've got a question about New Zealand, drop it into the Q&A if you want to. I see there's a new one here now. Let me have a look. Interesting topic. That's cool. So you might want to ask me a question about, I don't know, where are the hobbits from in New Zealand? Jump into the Q&A and ask a question as well, and we can see how that works. The reason why we want to do this again is this interactivity. You learn by doing. You don't learn by watching. I'm not going to be like Mike by watching and binging on the whole of the Michael Jordan Netflix series. I'm going to be like Mike by actually getting out there and spending my time on the basketball court. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to move on from this. We have got more interaction coming during the session, so be prepared for that. And we're all Windows fan, but one person's watching it on a tablet. That's great. Tablets are wonderful as well. I use both. Okay. Thanks for filling in the poll. So a little bit about us. Before COVID-19, we'd run private classes and individual coaching and the odd online training when requested. We'd earned quite a few air miles as we travelled around the country delivering classes like this. You can see that I'm up in the top right, and actually Susan and our team is here. So Susan and I delivered the training that we're going to talk about throughout this session. But we prided ourselves on being a small company with around 6 trainers. We won the Microsoft Training Partner of the Year award a few years ago, and we focus again on interactive training, and we would deliver this on site. There's a boardroom, a rather squished boardroom, I must say, but we would have also delivered in gyms, a dairy shed, so a cow shed, a super yacht, that was a lot of fun, and in really large boardrooms across New Zealand and in this space. You'll see there's laptops there. We would always bring laptops, either the client's laptops or our own laptops there, because again, it's this learning by doing approach. So bringing laptops allows people to interact and have a great time as they're going through and actually learning. So that was before COVID. On the 23rd of March, New Zealand locked down. So I was actually delivering a training course on Teams, and on that day it was announced that the next day we were going to be locking New Zealand down for over a month. It ended up being about 6 weeks. At that stage we had 100 confirmed COVID cases. So lockdown means that you cannot work from your office, full stop. Schools were shut. Only essential services could operate from their office. So essential services were food producers and supermarkets. That was about it. It was really, really tight. Only just recently, in fact, last weekend, did the bars open in New Zealand. So we've slowly, gradually come out of that. So everything was locked down and you couldn't go anywhere. As of yesterday, interestingly, we have only 21 active cases and we've had no new cases in the last 5 days. This story is not really about COVID. It's about a butcher, a fund manager and an insurer. So there was 3 clients that we're going to talk through, and I'm going to pull examples during this session. So Hellers are a butcher. They make awesome bacon. So that's really important, and some great sausages as well. Now, we'd done some on-site training for them, but as COVID started, they wanted to be able to ramp up their online training. This was the only client that we delivered training with where they were actually still in their office, which was a bit freaky. You'd look out and you'd see a couple of people there, because obviously you need to be in the bacon factory to make bacon. In the middle there, Kiwi Wealth. Kiwi Wealth are a fund manager, so a superannuation fund in New Zealand. They've got about 200 staff. And we had pre-scheduled some courses that we were planning to deliver, and obviously we couldn't. They were lucky. They had laptops available, and all the staff of around 200 could work from home, but they wanted to rapidly accelerate their usage of Teams and also across Microsoft 365. The last one, the interesting one, was AIA. So that's a Pan-Asian insurance company, and they had acquired a New Zealand company called Sovereign. And during the middle of this process, so Sovereign kept their IT systems within a bank. They needed to move out of the bank into the AIA Office 365 environment. So that meant your standard Office 365 moving from Exchange on-premise to Exchange online, and a lot of information moved from their files still on the server. But the complexity of that, and for a friend from Chicago, is they needed to do the whole thing remotely. Okay, so the users there did have laptops, which was great, but they were used to using those laptops basically as a window in via a terminal server into their existing environment. And for those that have had issues with VPNs, which were a lot, yes, there were issues. But we found that Teams was a great window in. You didn't need to use a VPN to access it. You could come straight in from your own home internet. And we used Teams as the lever to train, on the change that was happening within Office applications. They were switching from Office 2010 to the latest version of Office 365 Pro Plus. And also introduce Teams as a collaboration tool, and introduce Office 365 on mobile and Office 365 sharing documents with SharePoint or OneDrive. So Teams was this venue for us to be able to remote in and run training courses. So what we wanted to do is we needed to pivot really, really quickly from classroom training on site to online learning, but live online learning. And we wanted to keep the things that we treasured and we knew we did well, which was the interactivity and having great engaging course content. But we needed to make a couple of changes. One of the things that we needed to think about was the course content and course length. And that was important. You think that people have been sent home to work from home. Their kids are at home as well. So trying to get people to focus in on a full half day of courses, which is normally what we do with modules, wasn't going to happen. So we needed to split our course into 1 hour modules. And that's okay in some topics. In some topics, they build from each other. So we came out with, a boot camp of courses. So an introduction, working within an effective meeting, a mobile course. We ran those over a period of time. And the important thing with all of those is we needed to have exercises to embed the learning, and watch out, we've got an exercise coming up shortly. We couldn't also rely on the normal things that we would have in a classroom environment. So a whiteboard and individual support, the ability to be able to turn around and point at a screen or help somebody by looking over their desk. We couldn't do that. So how were we going to manage that? So we split the courses up into 1 hour chunks, had really clear areas of what we were going to cover, so people knew what they were getting themselves into in a course, and we worked through from there. We also needed a booking system. So we need an online booking system that people could book into a course, get a reminder, be able to schedule from a time. And we were a bit concerned with the AIA one. There was a lot of people to train. So we needed to manage capacity. And we set capacity as around 20, which is a little bit higher than normal, but that worked out fine. And we were rolling new dates. Sound like it was a rock concert. It wasn't. And I always said earlier in the chat that I can't sing, but it allowed us to roll new dates very quickly as demand booked out courses. So we used a product called Bookwhen. It was great, super easy to do. You could have that whipped up in 5 minutes. People could see what they did, and it met a couple of key things. One was a controlled capacity. Secondly, people got a reminder just before the training. And thirdly, they got sent an email invitation with the meeting request. So it allows us to work through in that. So that worked quite well. And I'll cover the registrations process in a little bit more detail now. Now, there were some really good learnings that we took away from the session. I just want to pop into the Q&A. Yeah, Jordan, Chicago, yes, absolutely. So there's a couple of learnings that we picked up during the sessions. Let me just jump to this next slide. Cool. Okay, so the registration process, some learnings that we took around that. I'm going to bring up a slide on each of these. There's some learnings around running the sessions and building interaction. Watch out for that interactive exercise that we're going to do, and how we had to adapt our training delivery style and follow up. So the registration process, this was interesting, is how do you run a booking process where we didn't want to send out a Teams meeting invite for each individual session? Because the challenges of that is, A, it would sit in somebody's calendar. B, if you had to roll to a new one, a new date very quickly, you would need to send a new invite, go into Outlook, do that, adjust the booking system. So how that works in person training is normally you say, oh, great, we're just going to book that meeting room for the whole day, and then we'll just keep putting out sessions as they start filling up. So you know you've got that space booked. So we took the same approach with booking online, except how would we do that in that way? Is we created a channel, and your meeting invite was to a Teams channel. So that channel was meeting room 1. Not unsimilar to what's been done for the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. It was a channel that was available for everybody within the organization. They could just come in and join. It wasn't a private channel, a private team, and they would get a link to that channel. That meant that we could run multiple sessions and just keep offering those. And all the chat and the recording of the meeting would sit back in the channel. Didn't end up somewhere else. We found that the simplest way to do it, when we knew that we were going to have multiple courses at the same time, we'd use a second meeting room. So exactly the same approach that you would have in real life. You would have a meeting room and you'd book the one beside it, and you'd have Dave presenting in one and Susan presenting in the other. So that worked really well as a booking process. And we found that most people managed to be able to click on the link, come into Teams, they'd see it in the channel. One of the learnings there is we needed to be in the meeting first. So we'd get there about 10 minutes earlier. And as we started, we saw people would join earlier and practice, and we would have during the session, hey, come in and practice beforehand or ask some questions early to check your tech. As we went through the training, people got more experienced, and some people ended up jumping into the sessions right on time. So people started arriving bang on when they were due, which I'm sure is something that that you've seen as we've started working from home. And again, we kept it relevant about talking about meeting rooms. So then running the training session, there are a couple of things that we picked up here. I'm just going to move the slide deck across. So people arrived early, and we wanted to assume that it was their first Teams meeting. So we had this PowerPoint up and running here. I'm just going to run through this. And we would run through this PowerPoint using the presenter view in Teams. So we'll just step through this. Cool. This is just going to play a little video. Hopefully you can all hear this. Maybe it's not going to play a little video. We'll come back up and give that another go. There we go. So if you have issues with camera and sound, you can come in and select from the device settings, and you'll see there that it will choose, you can actually talk and you'll see the microphone moves. If that's still not working, you can head up to the top and hit on your avatar and do a test call. You drop out of this call and it allows you to call and listen to somebody. So it talks and then it talks back to you. So that's quite good for testing. So we would run through that before each session for the first couple of minutes, just on a repeat, so people would get their sound right and all the other detail on there. You can all hear me okay, I'm sure? Cool. A couple of things around running the session. Standing desks are great. Really good to be able to stand and work in that space, and investing in a good light so that you can look better on camera. What we found, and you can see we've got a nice virtual background there, is that new backgrounds came out as we were presenting, so everybody had a lot of fun in that space. And we did that before the session, got people to pop up and change their background and share their screen and things like that. So they got comfortable with the technology, just as if you were in a personal class, you would come in and plug in your tech and people would give you a bit of a hand doing that. So, but a couple of key things was a standing desk was really useful, and also having some studio lights. And the virtual backgrounds were a good icebreaker. Now, building interaction is incredibly important in training, and adults learn differently to children. Children, most of the time, they will respect you and they will see you as a leader and a knowledgeable person in that space. And yes, you can get by with that a little bit in training, but adults bring a couple of other areas that you need to be focused on. So firstly, they learn by doing. So they want to watch and participate in exercises. It needs to be relevant. You need to explain why this is relevant for them to spend their time in this training. How will it help them in their role? So if you're doing Outlook training and it's, hey, this will help you save time and be more productive in Outlook so you can get home earlier. That's the what's in it for me. So you need to drive through those things. And they've got existing experience. So they need to be able to relate to, okay, here's a new tool. Here's some experience that I've got. So it might be presenting sales proposals or producing sales proposals. They've got experience in how to do that. But what's new when they do that within Microsoft 365? So they can co-author, they've got versions, they've got other things like that. So that allows them to think and make those linkages between the two. So that becomes really important. You can see that pop out when people start saying, oh, does this mean that I could use this tool to do this? That's great, that will save me time. And that's the drivers that people are working their way through. So we would see that in the classes. They'd go, hey, that was great. Does this mean that I can apply this to my role? And those are the linkages that you want people to adults to take away, and that's as you train. Now, one of the other things that we would focus on in that space is, interactive workshop versus a demonstration. So interactive workshop, they're engaged, it's interactive, and you would argue there's a better learning outcome because it's a lab and they're working their way through. Whereas a demonstration, built in that photo, less engaged, it's harder to deliver. You end up talking to yourself a lot. You can cover more content to a larger audience. So you can do both. A session that we ran on what's new in Office, we deliberately said that's a presentation. We don't want you to engage and do exercises. You're not going to pick up everything out of the session, but we're going to very quickly run through 30 or 40 new tips and features in Office 365 in 40 minutes. And if you come away with 5 of those, so you're setting the expectation at the start, if you come away with 5 or 6 of those that are relevant, that's awesome. Do that. But as I said, engagement and interaction is really important. So I've been talking for, I don't know, 20 minutes now. So you might be getting a bit hungry. I am. So we're going to run into another exercise. And this is one of the exercises we did. And I'm going to get you to do this shortly yourself with me. So what we did here was we shared up a screen. And there was the joy here.
The courier.
This is the courier arriving at home when we were training.
Going nuts in the background.
Shagan, you might need to move your name down one. You're in the title.
So the exercise here is we got them all to just fill out some information in a Word document, but they're beginning to learn how to code.
Now you can kind of write over other people. The best analogy I've heard for that is, and you can sit and go up to a table, and if there's spare seats, you would sit at the spare seat. You wouldn't just sit on somebody's lap. And you can see where somebody else is when you're interacting with this document. So, you don't jump into the same box where they are.
So I'm going to make you do this now, and I'm just going to jump into the chat again. Now, when you're running an exercise and training, you would tell people what you're going to do, you'll demonstrate, and then you get them to do it. So tell, demonstrate, and do. And you may need to repeat that a couple of times as you go through. So what I'm going to do here, so I'm telling you, is I'm going to drop into the chat a link that is to a document that we're going to co-author and work together on. Then I'm going to demonstrate how you can add information to it, and I'm going to get you to fill out information from there. So I've told, demonstrate, and then we're going to do. I'm just going to grab that link now. So this is the demonstration bit. Here's a document here. I'm going to select the share option. And I'm going to choose this anyone with a link and apply. I'm going to copy this link. And I'll drop it into the chat as a new announcement. And what I'd like you to do, you'll see in the chat that it comes up as I want you to click on the document link. and it'll bring you through. I'd be interested to know what your local time and your local greeting is. So here I'm in New Zealand, so I'm going to put in New Zealand. And what is it? It's 5:26 PM. It has got dark outside, and kia ora would be our local Maori greeting. So I can see there's a couple other people coming into this document now. We've got a GC, a guest contributor, and there might be a few others. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of time for you to come in. There we go. And you keep it real. You notice that when we were demonstrating in that session, the courier arrived, the dog went nuts. That's okay. We had people come in. Good morning. We had people coming into these sessions from home. We had kids rolling in and out. We had everything happening there. We also found that when you said, hey, turn on your cameras and bring up your cameras, everybody did. So you're starting to get them confident and feeling really good about using the technology. Ciao. I don't think we've got any friendly Australians here, so we can probably say good day, mate, as well. And we find that this table is a really good way for people to actually see the power of co-authoring. You can see where people are there and you're all contributing on one page, so you can see you've got some interactivity happening. There's a little bit of science around the timings of this. You know, once you've talked for 10 or 15 minutes, people do want a break. They want to be able to get out and get interactive and do stuff, and it allows them to work through there. So we've learnt, we've got people from around the world. That's really awesome. And we've also learnt some local greetings in each location. One of the interesting things we find in training is how long do you pause for people to answer a question? So if I said, hey, drop a comment into the live event, do you pause for a period of time? And you normally want to pause for almost an uncomfortable period of time so people can answer. If you go, hey, great, have we got any questions? No, thanks. Look, it's pretty easy. We'll just move on. All you're doing there is telling people, tokenly, hey, I'd like to answer a question. And B, you're then insulting them by saying, oh, look, it is pretty easy. So the person down the back of the class who goes, I do have a question, but I'm not feeling confident to ask it, you've lost them already. So you want to make sure you've got enough time for people to ask questions. And we found that the chat was actually quite good because you can ask questions in a non-threatening way, and you may get people that would ask questions in chat that may not normally ask across a larger group. And we'll take some questions at the end, or drop something into the questions now if you want to, and I'll answer it either during the session or at the end. Okay. I'm going to move on if that's okay. So thanks for doing that, but it was good to be able to do that. So you see, we told, we demonstrated, and then we got you all to do, which was great. Training delivery style. There's a few things that we learned in this, so take it slow. Pauses, alternate your delivery style. Presenter view is great. Why is presenter view great? Because you can do things like this. I can grab my pen and we can say, look at that item, or actually that person over there, or this is the button that we want you to focus in. You could also do things in presenter view like zoom in. So you can say, okay, we're going to focus in on zoom in this area. So presenter view in PowerPoint was really, really good. I found that better than when you can actually present when you upload a PowerPoint into Teams. That was okay, but you didn't have this level of interactivity to be able to zoom back and forward, which is what you do in a classroom, yeah? Ask questions. as you go through. And that could be a simple, just use the hands up feature, although that's only arrived last week, but get people to jump in and ask a question in the chat. And park some questions for after the class. That's always useful. So being able to park a question, go from there. We did find that people joined earlier, and after a period of time, they got more confident and they joined right on time. So a session would start on the hour and there would be nobody there 1 minute before, and then suddenly 20 people would arrive just like that. And we also found that people joined multiple sessions. So they would come in and they would join a session and they'd join the next session again down the track. So we had people spending all day. What we did find during the process is that people got tired. And I think a lot of people felt this over this period of time, as they may have got really excited for a couple of weeks, but then after about the third week of lockdown, they haven't had a haircut, they're getting really tired, they're dealing with scratchy kids at home, they got tired. And we did see the drop off in numbers at that stage, but in the lead up, we saw 80-90% attendance rates. We also saw on the time of the change, we saw the drop down go there because people were dealing with new email accounts, a whole lot of other stuff, and training was sort of the last thing they wanted to focus on when they were trying to push their way through. We'll just move over to this next slide. So a couple of technical tips that we found that were useful. You could demonstrate the mobile apps within Teams. That worked really, really well. So being able to present the mobile app within Microsoft Teams and share your screen was great. It's natural to make mistakes. So quite often, because we were jumping from sharing your screen to not sharing your screens, we'd start talking and forget to share your screen. So we made sure people called us out when we did that. Recording the sessions was really useful, although interestingly enough, not a lot of people came back and actually watched those recordings, but they were useful. But what we did find really good was recording it and then using the channel to answer questions afterwards, because the chat would pop into the people that have participated. So you could answer questions or send surveys out afterwards. So that worked really quite well. On the right-hand side here on the screen, just bring up my pointer. So just here, this is how we set it up. So we had general channel. So we always met in the general channel, although for this course here, because we're running two at the same time, we use that on another channel. The other little pointer there is enlarge your mouse cursor. So you don't have the ability to be able to put up a screen and point to it like you would if it was in-person training. So if you can make your mouse pointer really large and in a different color, that helped because your mouse pointer can be quite small. So that worked really, really well. Now, for one of the projects, we also used, just move on to the next slide, we used Teams for support. So we had the training team where people would come, the classroom. But then we also said, okay, if you want to ask questions after the sessions, come into Teams and ask those. So we had a channel per product. And we ran drop-in sessions where people could come in and ask questions, and we were pretty quick on responding to those questions. And we encouraged others to, post your questions there, or we'd prompt some questions. So we had probably half of the company involved in this this Teams channel, and we did run drop-in sessions, so Q&A type sessions. They weren't super popular. That would have been nice to have had more in those sessions, but for those that did attend, they certainly got value. So it allowed you to deflect a complex question in a training session, say, hey, go into the support site and ask questions there. Obviously, also the people that had joined these teams, then you could reach them via chat and instant message and at mentioning the channels. So we'd use that, but with care, not to overload people. But that was a good way to promote extra training sessions, as you can see Sinead was doing here. Now, what AIA did, which was really smart, was as part of their cutover, they created a different one again called the Hypercare channel. And so that was for daily. So it only started on the time of the cutover in Office 365. So, and this might be of interest to a team member in Chicago. I'm just going to grab the laser pointer here. And so it only started here. And you can see really it only lasts for 2 weeks. But they would do daily updates, they would do daily posts, and it was split into these areas of, do I have a technical problem? How do I find something? How do I do something? And other messages. So suddenly it became a messaging platform just for a period of time during that change. How would have you done it without Teams? well, you probably would have ended up sending a large amount of all staff emails, which people would have got bored with or replied to all, etc. So it provided this white glove service where people could ask a question and you could mention a response, and they would very quickly triaged. The end result of that, if somebody did have an issue that needed to be resolved, then they had to log a ticket and it would be managed in a technical space. But a lot of stuff you could triage without having to answer a ticket. So it took the weight down on actual support tickets. So this hypercare channel was really awesome and worked really, really well. Okay, participant feedback. So we sent out some surveys after the sessions. The majority of people attended probably 2 or 3 sessions, which surprised us. We were expecting people just to attend, 1, maybe 2. They rated them 4.76 out of 5 on a satisfaction scale. That's bang on what we normally achieve in a classroom with a 78% net promoter score out of 100. And what I guess we're really proud of as a team is we got feedback that we were aiming for when we set up these sessions. With great session, it was informative, paced, combination of slides and practical experience, and that's what I've tried to blend into this session as well, so you can get a feel that you can get people to do exercises when you're delivering training remotely. So it achieved those areas, which is what we were really trying to focus on. What would we change? Well, I would have got a haircut before lockdown because the hair got a bit long as we went through. We would have probably developed a learning path, learning that people took multiple sessions. Developing a learning path would have been good and could have given us a bit more time in that. There's always a balance in training of how much information do you want to give people. And really the purpose was just to give them enough training to be able to continue to do their work without impacting their productivity. There are hundreds of apps in Office 365 and that's awesome, but you don't want to overload them with everything when all you're trying to do is minimize the disruption to the business as you move into Office 365. Down the track, that's when you start implementing the other apps and other areas. But if you're just trying to move them through and keep the distraction down, then a learning path would have been good with a bit more space. We would have implemented Microsoft Learning Pathways, and we do that a lot. And if you haven't seen that, do go and search for it and have a look. So Learning Pathways provides you with an intranet with content. So we basically achieve that within Teams. And as with most projects, implementing a plan to maintain the momentum and adoption, I think that's going to be a challenge with a lot of organizations, is the adoption rate for Teams has gone through the roof. But how do you maintain that? And you probably realistically aren't going to maintain it at the same level. People will start meeting in person, which is great. But how do you maintain some of that momentum and adoption so you don't go backwards and change your behavior? So we would think about changing those approaches if we were to do it again. So that's all that I wanted to cover in this session, but I'd be keen to, if you've got questions, jump into the chat and I'll take those questions now. Just a reminder also on the raffle. So if you want to win the Oculus Quest, you can follow that link there. Remember, you got to answer 5 questions. So that was BitLow M365 raffle. And grab your phone out if you've got an iPhone. I presume it works on an Android phone as well. And if you point your camera at those QR codes, you'll see that it'll automatically pop into a Microsoft form for you to fill out. But I'm going to jump into, I'm going to leave that up. And I'm just going to jump into the chat here and see if we've got some questions. So I know one of the questions that we had earlier was around, so our visitor from Chicago was around moving their organization to a Teams migration. So a Teams migration is more than just Teams. It's SharePoint, it's OneDrive as well. So you're introducing those at the same time. And yeah, you can turn them off, but that brings with it its challenges. So we certainly worked through those as we went through. I'll just pause here and we'll see if we've got any questions. I didn't catch the keynotes during this session. They were too early in the morning or too late at night. But yeah, post a question if you've seen something that's pretty neat in the keynotes. I'd be interested to know what I should be watching out for as well. Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to just going to publish this and I'll talk to that question. So the question, you'll see it in the published list, was what do you think the biggest challenge or obstacle to users new to 365 or Teams? So let's split those into two. So new to 365, if they're using Office and a server, you can get through. The changes in email are not huge. So the biggest obstacle in that space is probably changing their behavior and identifying benefits for them to change their behavior. So what's in it for me and why should I change my behavior to take advantage of the new features? Teams is, I guess, a three-headed beast, as we like to describe it, because it's got three feature sets: video conferencing or virtual conferences like we are now. And that's new. People understand that or may understand that or are useful. And that's okay. That works quite well, and people probably have got relevance and have used that before. The middle one is this chat collaboration area, and that's probably the area which is the biggest challenge to get people to do it. And we saw with one of the companies that we worked with, they had gone wild and set up teams everywhere, and every team only had one channel, the general channel, and people were getting overloaded. And then it was trying to back that back and give people the knowledge on, okay, I should use channels to break up conversations, and when should I use private chat or group chat versus conversations and channels, and positioning those two quite differently so people would understand. So this is a bit of guidance on how you should use it. And we found that, with the AIA example, using that hypercare channel, people could see, because you'd already set up the channels, you could see how you should be using the tool because it is a new tool. And the third bit of Teams is the file sharing collaboration, which is great, and but also introduces versioning, co-authoring, and a whole lot of new ways of doing business. So those ones there, I would say that introducing Teams, the video conferencing side of things, it's reasonably standard. But the chat and collaboration is a new area for people, and they need to understand how to use channels, which is really easy to, or not actually easy is not the right word, is fun to train in a session, because people can start to see and put on that learning by doing and clicking and going, hey, that makes sense. I should use it this way. And then the collaborating on documents as well. Good question. Anybody else want to pop a question into the chat? Perfect. So if there's no further questions, I will hang around in this channel afterwards if you want to ask a question. But thanks for joining. As I said, feel free to fill in the speaker feedback or the event feedback. And don't forget also that if you can go in the draw or the raffle, I should say, for the Oculus Quest all-in-one by following the link there. So thanks again for those that are around the world. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon from wherever you are. And thanks for joining. And don't forget, and I hope to meet you, I guess, in person next year in Las Vegas. Yeah, it's a good. I'm going to publish up this, and I'm just going to talk to this question on Yammer. Yammer versus Teams chat. So there's pros and cons in both, and I think with these organisations, they were not of the size to have the internal communications team to run both. So if you've only got 100 odd people, and I've posed this question to a few of the Yammer product managers, where would you focus on? And you've got to be careful that you don't you've got to be able to differentiate between Yammer and an org-wide chat in Teams. And if you're a small organization, the guidance we normally give is that if you've only got 50 or 100, which is a reasonable size organization in New Zealand, just focus on one and do it well. You're a larger organization, then Yammer and Teams are great, and you've got the outer circle and inner circle approach with Yammer and Yammer communities, and there's been a lot of great work from the Yammer team to differentiate the two products over the last year, so you can focus on doing that. But you don't want to overload users with the confusion of, oh, I've got two tools that are very similar, which one should I use? And so you need to put the effort in to differentiate them, otherwise you scatter your communications across a variety of places. So yes, Yammer has its benefits, and I do like the markers, questions, etc. But it's been able to, where do you put the effort not to confuse the user with two tools? If you do want to follow us, we're on Twitter at @RippedOrange, so feel free to follow us in that space. Okay, so I'll publish this question. Yeah, university is a perfect example for using Yammer across the student base. That makes great sense in that case. And again, you've got the usage. What we find also really useful with Yammer is when you have involved an external organization as well. So you might have communities of practice that you would have across organizations, across different students, across different schools or education type areas like that. So that works really well for Yammer. Yes, we do. So we had a question, do we do training for Teams owners? Yes, we do. We do a lot of that. That was interesting. We did run that for one, and that was that organization that had multiple teams all with general channels. And when we stepped back and said, okay, let's have a think about how Teams works with channels, etc. And then we got them to do as an exercise. So we flipped them into, did this online. We got them to go into different channels within Teams and work together in a document or a OneNote and work through how many teams they would have and what the purpose of the channels were. You got to do both. You just start thinking teams, that's okay, but when you start working through, okay, the purpose of the channels, and then you take the next onion layer there, which is, okay, what settings are we going to have on those channels? Who can post? Who can not post? Are we going to moderate? So those type of areas become really useful. It allows people to actually think and come back in with a plan on that. And look, Teams is great. Our daughter is using Teams at school now, and really cool tool, and learned a lot of how that's used in education. So if you're looking for inspiration on how to use some of this technology, look at the kids. They're already using it. It's natural to them, and they're quite comfortable with how that technology works in that space. So it's certainly a great area to look at for some inspiration on how you can use that technology in a workplace.